The Summer Games Minute, brought to you by Mass Mutual. It is one of the most coveted trophies in the world, but are gold medals really gold? Well, mostly, they're not. The gold medals given out these days are nearly entirely silver and are plated with pure gold to give them that iconic sheen. Silver medals are, of course, made with silver, and bronze medals are a combination of copper and other metals like tin or zinc. And while winning an Olympic medal is priceless, the value of the materials in the medal are not. In recent games, some of the materials used to make the medals have come from recycled cell phones. Mass Mutual celebrates women's sports history and understands the nuances in how women want and need to manage their finances. With quality product solutions and guidance, a Mass Mutual financial professional can help you plan for both short-term and long-term money goals. Learn more and get started at massmutual.com.
Tankinis, bikinis, monokinis. Walmart is the best kept secret for stylish summer swimwear. Make a splash with hot summer essentials like beach bags, sandals, and more. Find your style at Walmart.
Welcome to Camp Sweet, where you can level up your s'mores by using Nature Valley chocolate crunchy dipped granola squares. It's a perfect hack for a memorable family bonfire. Nature Valley.
The Athletic.
What just happened in the world of MotoGP? Just when it seemed like Ducati's 2025 factory rider plan was set and Jorge Martin would get the red seat he's craved for so long, it has all been very abruptly turned inside out. Marc Marquez is now set to be announced as Pecco Bagnaia's 2025 Works Ducati teammate, and Jorge Martin has already announced he is out of Ducati completely and off to Aprilia in a very abrupt move and a very abrupt change of plans and a very abrupt change of everything we thought was happening. This is the Race MotoGP Podcast emergency episode. I'm Matt Beer. I'm joined by Val Khorounzhiy and Simon Patterson. All of us a little bit croaky in the early hours of Tuesday morning because, Monday was pretty settled. Val's about to go out for his wedding anniversary. Simon was winding everything down at the test at Mugello. I was doing whatever my job involves. And then suddenly it all kicked off a little bit. Simon, how did the day unfold from your side? Talk us through how it all happened in the paddock as this massive news broke.
So we had a relatively quiet, we had the quietest test I remember because it was raining. So essentially we spent all day doing very little with a few people wobbling around in the wet for a while, but not an awful lot in the way of track action. Then I think about 4 p.m. someone unleashed a story saying Marc Marquez was off to factory Ducati. We did a lot of chasing it, a lot of trying to align it, trying to find out from sources whether or not there was any truth to it, and no one seemed to have heard anything about it. Then the next thing, and I went back and looked at the timeline on this because it's really important. At 5:46, we got sent a graphic from Aprilia saying we have news coming at 6 o'clock. Watch our social media channels. At 6 on the dot, my tweet, and with the copy of the graphic in it, was quote tweeted by Alicia Spigaro with some suggestive emojis. And at 6:02, Aprilia updated their Instagram page with a video of Jorge Martin walking into Massimo Rivola's office. And yeah, there you are. Jorge Martin is an Aprilia MotoGP rider, and it seems like, from what we can gather from the timeline, it seems like he was told on Sunday evening that he wouldn't be a factory Ducati rider in 2025, so he immediately phoned Rivola, and within 19 hours, a deal was done. Probably the fastest moving MotoGP deal in history.
Massimo Rivola, the Aprilia team principal, took the media through that timeline. Didn't give out every single detail, but he was kind of giggling through much of the media scrum yesterday as he talked to this massive coup that his team has pulled off. Let's hear a little bit from Rivola now about his busy Sunday evening and Monday morning.
Since Alicia decided to retire, we start speaking to everybody. The strategy was quite clear, not doing the first move, because we didn't want to do any gift to anyone. But when we felt that there was an opportunity, that it was actually last night, we were quite quick in let's say, making action rather than talk. So we found a deal very, very quickly. Also in this, I have to thank Aleix to do that, and here we are. Last night I called my boss and I said, we have a chance, and he said, get it, go for it, and I did. So we have all the team of the finance, legal, guys that work during the night to make it done, and I don't know if it's based on emotion, but I like to think that the choice of Jorge is done because Aprilia did a consistent growth during the years. We are actually the only one that so far won races as alternative to his current bike. So it's another another item of the puzzle to fix it. Yeah.
You said that the guys worked all night to get it finalized. What was the rush to announce today?
Well, I think that announcing at this point, being the first to announce, it showed that we can do things quickly and when we can decide quickly. So it was just part of let's fix it, it's done, and let's focus on the next step.
So that's what Rivola gave away about how it all happened. Simon, you've also found out a little bit more about the timings of everything that unfolded.
So just to give an idea of how late this was all done, the Instagram video that we saw announcing it with Aleix and Martin and Rivola was shot after 5 p.m. Whenever I said that announcement came at 5:46, the significance of that is that because everyone had started packing everything away, that included Aprilia's printer, and it was 5:40 before they found a working printer to actually print the contract and sign it. So this was announced. We were told this news was coming 6 minutes after the deal was signed. That's how last minute this whole thing was. Just incredible.
That is absolutely fantastic. We'll talk a lot in this podcast about all the ramifications of what's just happened and how things might go for next season, also the rest of this season, because it's got implications for how this title fight's going to unfold as well. But the big thing I want to get into first is what changed, because by the end of the Mugello race weekend, we were pretty set on Martin getting the factory seat. There was the standoff. Was Marquez going to move to Pramac, as Ducati appeared to want, or was he going to stay at Gresini? Was he going to get a top-spec bike for next season? How was that chess match going to play out? But that was a relatively minor problem compared to what's since exploded. We're on a bit of a run lately in this podcast of Val being completely right about stuff. We had that podcast where he declared Yamaha rubbish and we were being optimistic, and then sure enough at Mugello, Yamaha was rubbish. And then on the Sunday night Mugello podcast, me and Simon being quite innocent about Marquez's intentions and being, he just wants the best bike, he's not really thinking big picture. Val was like, no, Marquez is a political mastermind who's trying to neutralise most rivals for 2025 in the process of getting what he wants. So Val, congratulations, you were right. So has Marquez just pulled off a massive political game here, got himself on the best seat on the grid and made a bunch of potential rivals? Because this is not just Martin exiting Ducati, fair chance of Pramac exiting Ducati now too. Val, over to you. You were right about everything.
Well, I wasn't right about everything because I did think it was coming Martin's way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And ultimately, we're relying a little bit on the original reporting that broke the story here. Shout out to German, I think, who had it first. What a wonderful scoop. So it made our lives easier, because imagine if just the Aprilia press release shows up at 6. Just out of nowhere, everybody thought Martin's signing with Ducati, and then suddenly he walks into the Aprilia. I mean, that would have been, that would have done something to my wedding anniversary, and I don't really even want to think about the consequences. Look, I don't think it was a deliberately political thing to try to rearrange the pieces on the chessboard for 2025, as much as I think it was an indirect power flex. And ultimately, Marc Marquez bet on himself that he still has the pull, he still has the touch, that ultimately, if he maneuvers himself into a position to where Ducati has to choose between him and basically anybody else, and in this case, anybody else is the championship leader,
yes,
and probably the best rider in MotoGP over the last 12 months, and somebody who is 5 years younger than him, and Ducati still is choosing him, and that championship leader is heading off to Aprilia. And now I don't think it'll be by design that now it feels like Pramac quite likely to leave. I don't think it's by design that Enea Bastianini's heading off somewhere. But it is really funny that just this little bit of holdout for Marc Marquez, as far as we can tell, as far as the reporting is saying, his unwillingness to just make things easy and go to Pramac and have Jorge Martin take the works bike looks to have created a situation where basically all of those pieces are off the board. And it's just Marquez as one of the two top dogs at Ducati. It's pretty incredible. I am super impressed. That was my first impression, really. Like, I'm really happy for Aprilia, whose project deserves this. I'm really happy for Jorge Martin because he's getting a worse bike, and it's a lesser chance of a championship next year as we stand. But if he had to accept something lesser again from Ducati, that would have felt questionable. But Marc won. Marc's the winner here. This is Marc flexing on the rest of the MotoGP grid.
The only thing I can say about Martin and a lesser bike is that I would imagine he's convincing himself right now that he's going to an Aprilia that's not a lesser bike. That the riders that they have just aren't as good as he is. It's the what we talked about on the post race pod. Yeah. It's the Pedro Acosta making the KTM look good, or is the KTM making KTM's other riders look good? He's going there thinking that he can win a championship in this. He has to be. Yeah. He doesn't have another choice. In his mind, he has to be that. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure Aleix Espargaro has spent the last 6 months telling him that he could go there and win a championship on it as well. So he can't show any weakness in that regards. He has to go in thinking, this is on. And now I'm a factory rider.
Yeah, a lot. We've got a lot of listener and social media follower input that we'll get into a little bit later in the episode, and it's a fascinating snapshot of what the Jorge Martin fan base thinks of this move and his treatment as well. Marquez being put on the red bike, that feels like it has come slightly out of the blue, given where everything was going into the weekend. We talked just now about Marquez putting Ducati in a tough position by refusing to go to Pramac, but there's still a big leap from Marquez going, no, I'm not doing that, to what happened about 48, 72 hours later. It feels like something massive has changed behind the scenes here.
The only thing I can think of is that they've sat down and had a good look at what he's doing on that year-old bike. That is not, this isn't the bike that Pecco won the championship on. It's a much, much earlier, much, much more basic version of it. And he's still in contention with, the guys that are on a package that Ducati knows more than anyone else on this planet, knows how much better it is. And the only thing I can conclude is that they've looked at what he's doing, looked at his data, looked at everyone else, and seen where basically the 0.2 or 0.3 a lap that he's missing to be completely dominant is all coming from the bike package. And they've just decided that, we can't afford to not utilize that. We have to give him what he wants. We have to give him the bike that he wants. He drew a pretty hard line in the sand about not going to Pramac. I think that if it's probably to an extent a bit of a Hail Mary to try and convince Pramac to stay, because it means that they're now guaranteed to get their factory bikes, because who cares where else they're going? Who cares about who's going to be Gresini anymore? They've got Marc Marquez in red. So you pick the best Ducati riders and offer them to Pramac to try and convince Pramac to stay. You offer them Bezzecchi, you offer them Di Gianantonio, you offer them, Bastianini to try and convince Pramac, because you've got the most important thing done. And this is potentially the least worst path to that, even though it means letting Jorge Martin go.
And also, for me, the least worst path was the Martin to Works team, Marquez to Pramac, which Simon, you've also argued is the least worst part.
But Mark said it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, but taken off the table. And I don't think it was. I shouldn't say, when I say stuff like political mastermind and things like that, I don't think Mark specifically had this exact scenario in mind when he was doing stuff. Not necessarily, but I do think that him putting a little bit of a sort of a snag into the works will have aligned with like the Ducati higher ups getting involved. So I'm thinking CEO Claudio Domenicali and stuff like that, to the point where, I mean, they've seen his performance. They will at the very least know that they can't really go wrong with either of those guys. Yes, losing Jorge Martin, who is younger, so has more MotoGP years, almost certainly has a MotoGP title in him at some point, it's terrible. But pure performance-wise, you're basically fine, whichever way you go there. And at that point, somebody in the Ducati higher up ranks will have been seduced by the idea of Marc Marquez in red, because that's only something you get one shot at. And if you pass it up, if you pass, the marketing opportunities, the absolutely legendary side of it, ultimately, Jorge Martin, he's doing great stuff in MotoGP. He's been an elite rider. It's been very impressive to watch. He will build a hell of a legacy. But right now, a Jorge Martin title doesn't weigh the same as a Marc Marquez title. Not in terms of engagement. We all know that. And, Marc, again, has made himself effectively the biggest MotoGP story of the year. Again. So that, for me, there will be a big part of Ducati. It's not just the on-track performance. Because the on-track performance, you could go either way. And there is an argument to be made that Jorge Martin got screwed. Absolutely. 100%. But, such is motor racing.
Yeah, we did ask you for your takes on what's happened and your questions as well via our MotoGP-based social media account at the Race Moto on X. And Andrew Wilson, Mouse Rat, and the Baba Yaga all chimed in with the point Simon's made about surely Marquez's performances on the 2023 spec bike were just so good, particularly relative to the other people on GP23s who Ducati has plenty of reason to rate, but are just being blown away, that they just had to act. My only skepticism about that was why now? This evidence that Marc is getting a lot out of the bike has been there for a long time now. What changed so suddenly? But I think that's where your theory that Marquez just sticking a little twig in the mechanism by saying, no, actually, I'm not going to go to Pramac, has probably been enough to tip it over the edge. And for all the other factors around marketing and his sheer pace to come back into the picture more firmly and go, okay, if we can't have our ideal scenario, we have to have a compromised one that just keeps this guy. Another point on X from Ellis Davis, this one really interested me. Does Marc moving to red and not having a GP25 at Grassini make the show a little less fairy tale? Does it lessen the appeal to new audiences? Which is quite a nice point. We've had the Marquez underdog story, and that has been a lovely tale to follow this year. And the other side point Ellis throws in as well that I think we should also just consider for a minute, was Stefano Domenicali's presence not just a coincidence? Did they push it? They, I assume, in this case, is Liberty Media, F1's owner, now coming into MotoGP as well. Is there a machination here of trying to get Marquez on the best bike possible? You guys are shaking your head straight away. I'd agree with you on that. But it's interesting, people are thinking that already. Not that Dorna's been shy about making the moves it needs to make the show what it wants. But is this less of a fairy tale, getting Marquez on the best bike rather than having Marquez do so well as an underdog?
Yep. This is like putting Marc Marquez back in a 2019 Repsol Honda. He's going to dominate next year. I find it hard to see anyone else as a title contender next season. I think he's going to be that good. I hope it's not the case. I would love to see Pecco Bagnaia win the title next year, because it would cement everything about his own talent. I think that would be the real fairy tale. Beating Marc Marquez when Marc's on the other side of the garage would just mean it would elevate Pecco Bagnaia to modern great status. But it's not going to be easy.
It is what Bagnaia needs, and it needs in a sense that it won't feel that way right now, but it is what he needs, because I think, as a guy who's, I think, keenly aware and in tune of his perception, and who really wants to craft himself a legacy, already having won 2 championships, which is 2 more than 99.9% of MotoGP riders. will ever win. I think Pecco Bagnaia hoped that allowing Marquez, not that he had much of a say in it, but the Ducati allowing Marquez into the camp this year would allow him to then go in a straight fight with Marc, and if he beats him, then that third title would be more valuable automatically than the previous two. But there is the asterisk of the bike spec, and everybody's aware of it, and you cannot really escape it. So 2025 is going to be that instead. That's going to be the chance to assert yourself over Marquez. Not to say that the other championships aren't valuable, because, again, even with a spec difference, always in racing, it's also how you got there. It's what you did to get yourself the best bike. And all of the success Pecco Bagnaia is reaping is a part of that. Same for Jorge Martin, same for Marc Marquez. It's all part of the moves they made, even off the track too. That's also part of the package and also part of the accomplishments. But if his legacy does need a straight fight with Marc, well, that's what we're getting.
The other thing that I think is worth mentioning at this point is that this news will also have implications on the 2024 title fight.
Yes.
Because there's no way that Marc Marquez remains on that GP23 Spec 0 now. We already saw at the test, even though it was rained off and he didn't get to ride, that there was new bits coming his way. And I would imagine that the bike that finished the race on Sunday for Jorge Martin is the bike that he finishes the season on now. Because that's fairly standard in MotoGP. When you announce you're leaving a manufacturer, you don't get the new parts. So I think, this will... Well, I mean, it's good news for me because it's going to be another year that a satellite bike doesn't win a title, right? But...
Or Gresini does with Marquez.
Well, yeah, I know, but I've always said that one doesn't count because it's Marc Marquez. But, for me, this does, all joking aside, this does elevate Bagnaia into, as if he already wasn't title favourite contender. I think this just bolsters him even more.
I believe the Marquez thing 100%. That would make total sense to me. I don't think I believe the Martin thing. I don't think they'll freeze him in spec or what. I know that's the done thing, but for me, Ducati is specifically in a situation where publicly that's a publicity hit they do not want. There's a difference between losing your championship leader who's won already so much for you and making it seem like when dominating MotoGP you're already putting your thumb on the scale, which is something they've desperately wanted to avoid every year of their current dominance. They've always wanted to make it look as much as possible that everybody's on an equal footing here in terms of fighting for the titles. They've avoided team orders like the plague. They've given Jorge Martin... Well, he doesn't feel they've given him a 100% chance last year.
You say they've avoided team orders like the plague, but they haven't. They've avoided publicly talking about team orders like the plague, but they've still done them.
Well...
mapping it still happened for
I mean, in the dominance era rather than the...
Yeah, but I think that any PR risk that there might be from freezing his spec, which is something that's going to be a bit hard to prove anyway and a bit hard to pin, it's going to be his word against theirs if he does publicly talk about it. The alternative is much, much better than having a number one plate in an Aprilia next year.
Yeah, I have to say we had quite a few responses on social media along the lines of there's no way Ducati is now going to let Martin be champion and take number one to Aprilia. Matthias Kainz, sorry if I mispronounced either aspect of your name, Rev B, both came up with things along the lines of what are the odds of Ducati giving extra support to Gresini and Marc to prevent Jorge taking number one plate with him, and Rev B hinting, if Ducati doesn't absolutely sabotage Martin like they've done with other riders that have lost favour. So there is a groundswell among the fan base of people thinking that Ducati now is not going to let Martin be champion. I don't see it's going to be anything deliberate, stark and obvious, but I can see that point of, in any part of major motorsport, if someone is leaving you to go to another manufacturer, they then get less stuff for the rest of the year, whether that's development parts or just get included in fewer conversations. Some of that stuff is surely going to have an impact.
Genuinely, this is going to be another prediction that I hope, as if all of them pan out or even 50% of them pan out, but I actually expect them to overcompensate here.
Really?
I expect them to make it, yes, genuinely. I think they're going to try to make a really big public show of backing Martin's title challenge. unless the bridge there is so burned that nobody's talking to each other ever again, which is also completely possible.
I think that the way that this timeline happened means that is completely possible. I mean, he basically rage quit the team.
He did. He really did.
You know, they told him something and he just walked next door to the biggest rival and said, all right, let's put pen to paper because screw those guys. There will be bad blood, at least initially. At least I think Ducati are probably quite glad this happened before a 3-week break so that he's got a little bit of a chance to cool down again before he turns up in the team again. But yeah, I think they will. I think they'll slowly start to freeze him out. And I think that the busiest man in MotoGP for the next few months will be Marc Marquez's crew chief, Frankie Carcetti. Because I think they will immediately start adding him into development conversations about next year's bike, and he's going to start playing a role in that. You would presume that he's going to go with Marc to the factory team. Yeah, I think there will be a power shift. I can't see there not being one.
You know we love talking stats here at The Athletic. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right. You could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/credit card.
Tankinis, bikinis, monokinis. Walmart is the best kept secret for stylish summer swimwear. Make a splash with hot summer essentials like beach bags, sandals, and more. Find your style at Walmart.
This episode is brought to you by Skinny Pop Popcorn. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Oh, so light and crunchy. Skinny Pop Original Popcorn is the snack you've been searching for. Made with just 3 simple ingredients: popcorn kernels, sunflower oil, and salt. Snacking never felt or tasted so good. Perfectly popped, endlessly delicious. Give yourself permission to snack and pick up Skinny Pop Original Popcorn today.
So we're just about to dive into a lot of your questions and takes on what has just happened. But before we do, very excited to let you know that MotoGP content is coming to the Race Members Club very soon. If you're not familiar with the Members Club, it's where for a small, very reasonable subscription fee, you get a lot of extra stuff, extra exclusive podcasts, extra chances to shape our content, chance to read our website without advertising on it. Lots of extras, basically, and lots of extra interaction with us. And if you just want MotoGP content in that, we're going to sort out a way for you to enjoy the 2-wheeled stuff without the 4-wheeled stuff as well, just as we have on our social media. So keep an eye on our social media, keep an ear on the podcast for our shouts about it, and keep an eye on the race website for details of when MotoGP content begins in the Members Club and how you can sign up to get it. But back to the interaction we're already having with you guys at the moment, which is via our email and our social media accounts. And the biggest topic when we asked for your takes was how are Marquez and Bagnaia going to get on as factory Ducati teammates. Call all beings on X referred to it as, I heard that Pecco was reportedly, let's say, not fond of Marc. Regan Faraja, and that's surely a mispronunciation of your name again, I'm sorry, described it as, it feels like the beginning of Yamaha's Jorge Lorenzo and Valentino Rossi saga all over again. There can be only one. Either Pecco or Marc will not be happy next year. Opinion on X called it a disaster in waiting for Ducati. Basically, there's a lot of people here going, this is just not going to work. Pen, pencil on X saying, can Pecco get along with Marquez, a protege of VR46 versus a rival of Valentino Rossi? Adam says, I don't get why Ducati needs Marquez. It's winning championships without him. Josh Bob Bill says the problem Ducati now is how to make them coexist. And as Patrick from Warrington put it on email, how do you think Pecco Bagnaia feels about Ducati's decision to sign Marquez? I'm sure I've heard Pecco say this year he wasn't fussed who his teammate would be and would back his ability to beat Marc. But would you feel a bit disrespected if you were Pecco?
I think Pecco will be relishing this to an extent for the reasons we've already talked about. I think he wants to beat Marc Marquez on equal terms to prove that he's one of the greats. I genuinely think that he's not going to be too upset by this. He's not really the sort anyway. He is a level-headed character. He's going to look at this rationally as this is the best thing that Ducati needed to do. and he's not going to be too upset by it at all. I think that why did Ducati do this? I think there's an element of Ducati needed to do this because I think everyone is still fearful of what a Marc Marquez KTM or Marc Marquez Aprilia combo could do. You know, they're winning titles without Marc Marquez in factory colours right now, but would they be winning titles if Marc Marquez was in someone else's factory colours? That's the worry, at least in part. But I think, grand scheme of things, Pecco's going to shrug this off.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder if the spectre of Marc Marquez suiting up in Tech 3 some pure mobility group brand colors scared the bejesus out of somebody at Ducati too. It should, because that does sound quite potent. We've seen what Pedro Costa can do even on one of those satellite bikes, and it's quite intimidating from a first year. And Marc obviously is no first year, even though at this point maybe he will not have that same incredible ceiling as Acosta. Regarding Bagnaia, I'm sort of in the same camp, but I do think initially he will not take it great. I don't think he'll, like, the first few days, I think he'll really not like it, because we've heard him be on record as saying that he'd probably prefer to keep Enea. Once that wasn't an option, I believe the feeling was that Jorge Martin would be his preferred teammate. It's now a second time that Ducati doesn't do the thing he wants in terms of picking his teammate, because he wanted Jack Miller kept around for 2023, and obviously that did not happen. And he and Marc have always been very cordial in public. There's not really been that much of a hint of a disagreement. If you want a big screaming match between Marc and somebody from the Valentino Rossi VR46 protege staple, that would be Marco Bezzecchi last year in Valencia. But again, Bagnaia and Bezzecchi are the bestest of buds, so get along famously. And this past weekend, Bagnaia had a bit of a rant towards Alex Marquez, who, wouldn't you know it, is the bestest of buds with Marc Marquez. Do not forget how close that pairing of brothers is, even by brother standards, like how much they really, truly, obviously care for each other. So you can see the cracks between the two camps, and I think it will be, at the very least, awkward at best, and awkward until the very first contact on track, upon which it becomes horrifically toxic, I suspect. But let's see. It'll be fun. I think it will be a headache. I think the fact that Ducati is going for that headache is yet another incredible flex by Marc Marquez, because he made them do this. He's making them do all of this. I kind of don't want any of this, but he's so good that you can't not.
Yes, you're right to say that Ducati has now twice ignored Bagnaia's request for who he wants as his teammate, and that could be seen as a snub. At the same time, Bagnaia's request for his teammate, and I don't think it is purely this, I don't think it's pure self-interest from Bagnaia, but his request for who he wants as his teammate has been the slower option each time than what Ducati wants to bring in, and Ducati has its own self-interest and wants some quick people, probably more than it wants harmony, I would say. I can see everyone out there on social media going, this is going to be explosive. There's, because Marquez has been involved in explosive things, and because of the Rossi link in the background through Bagnaia's relationship with the Rossi camp, and just purely being an Italian in this era. But we talked on our post-Mugello race podcast about Bagnaia becoming the new Italian hero and being part of the Rossi scene, but being really different to Rossi. And I feel like in this situation, Rossi's instinct would be, how can I stoke this fire harder? How Rossi would show how affronted he was if something like this had happened, as we saw with Lorenzo situations, and make it bigger and bigger,
yes.
Play on it. Yes. I feel like Bagnaia's instinct, if he's aggrieved, is to do the opposite, almost like make it not a problem, dampen it down, just pragmatically make it work. If he is, I can totally see Bagnaia expressing some disgruntlement if there's a spat at some point between them, but I don't see it erupting. I don't think Bagnaia is that character.
I think this is controversial, but I think he's smarter than Valentino Rossi. I think that he knows that the smarter play is to be quiet about it for now. There might be a time to be angry about it if they do start knocking each other off or whatever, but it's not right now. And the best approach here is to welcome Mark into the garage with a smile and have a knife hidden behind your back just in case you need it.
Exactly what I was thinking. I thought the knife was coming there in the second part of that sentence.
I'm going to take issue with that smarter than Rossi thing. I think Rossi was at a point of power and influence where he was aware he didn't have to care about being smart, and if he wanted to just absolutely go for it in a situation, he had nothing to lose because he was all-powerful Valentino Rossi.
Until he lost everything at Sepang in 2015 by enraging Marc Marquez.
I'm going to leave that topic there for this podcast.
Yeah, let's walk away from Sepang 2015, please.
That's a good idea.
Please.
Let's move on to what the Jorge Martin fan base is thinking, because this was really interesting. There's an awful lot of faith in him going straight to Aprilia and doing well, I would say. Stephen O describes the situation as one rising star, Martin, and one fading star, Marquez, and says Aprilia are the winners here. Marc might be dynamite for 2 years, but Jorge could dominate MotoGP for the next decade. With Pedro Acosta about to assault MotoGP on a KTM with never-ending budget, other bet on Martin longer term to face him down. Jed Timms calls this the best outcome personally for both riders. Because he sees Martin as a faster rider than Pecco in his eyes, but he doesn't think Ducati would have allowed Martin to be their main man while Pecco was there. Frozen Speed, Jochen at Frozen Speed, says, I can't wait to see Martin extract the maximum from the Aprilia on a regular basis. Who dares to predict where their ceiling lies? Paul Kelly says, I'm all for this. It's better when the elite talent is spread around. Martin is Aprilia's first alien. Let's see what he's got. There is so much excitement about Martin on the Aprilia from the Martin fans. There's also a little element of people, I've put this in a heading on our notes document called Martin's an over-emotional lunatic, which is the opinion being expressed by a few people out there. Perhaps a little bit of a harsh paraphrase of what you guys are saying. Flip B calls it a very emotional move and says, will a guy that only knows Ducati be the solution for Aprilia? Fisherman says, as a race fan, I'm asking, why would you get off a bike that you're leading the world championship with? And there's a few more along the lines of just basically saying, actually, this is quite a nice one. Honorat Greedy says, it sounds abrupt and feels like an emotional decision versus a calculated one. And there's also a few people just worrying whether Aprilia's up to the expectation that Martin's arrival is going to create. Tony Hughes says, I hope the Aprilia team get their shit together consistently. They certainly need to raise the bar. And the casual F1 fan says, I just don't think you win a title with an Aprilia, not in the state it's currently in. So, a little bit to get into there. Val, where do you want to dive first?
Well, on the emotional thing, I mean, obviously it's an emotional decision. Like, from everything we've heard, obviously it's just, it is, as Simon described, a bit of a rage quit. It's, he moved so fast, he beat the actual Ducati decision because clearly his camp and he personally were so irritated by how Ducati has handled this. But when people call it an emotional decision, I want them to ponder the alternatives, right? So somebody else is taking that factory seat again. Jorge Martin will feel that for the second or maybe even the third time, if you think about the prospect of a potential swap with the injured Enea Bastianini last season, that for the third time, he has given Ducati what more or less what it asked for. All it could have possibly asked for, because, he's been a front runner. He's been, many, many, many times and many weekends the best Ducati rider. And it's not proven enough. And at this point, can you really swallow it and just go, okay, give me the best satellite ride you got, show up there with, cap in hand and try to get what you can get? Will anybody take you seriously in future negotiations if you do that after you've spent months and months saying, if you don't give me a factory ride, I am out of here with the very first manufacturer that offers me something good, which is what he's been saying this whole time. This whole time he's been saying, no more Pramac, no more satellite ride. Either put me in red or I'm gone. When you've done that for so many months, can you walk back on it? Publicly, privately, for your standing on the market? Yeah, I think the satellite Ducati still might very well be the better bike next year than the factory Aprilia. I think that's entirely possible. But at a certain point, you also have to go with the manufacturer that shows you it wants you. And again, we always come back to this. Riders, more than anything, almost more than a good bike, want to feel wanted. They want to feel like the guy. It explains almost every move in MotoGP. Why did Johan Zarco trade a good Pramac Yamaha for Yamaha? Freudian slip. Why did Johan Zarco trade a good Pramac Ducati for whatever hunk of garbage he's riding right now? Because Honda showed him financially and in terms of long-term commitments, it wanted him, while Pramac/Ducati, mostly Ducati, all Ducati, made it clear that he was second choice. Now, Jorge Martin has been proven to him, he is third choice, basically, at Ducati. He was never going to stand for that. And I think if you were a MotoGP rider, you wouldn't either. None of them would. That's how it works. That's the game, baby.
Yeah. You made that point as a generic, a rider wouldn't stand for this initially there, Val, just going, all this situation, you can't be taken seriously if you don't stick to your guns on this one. But then, like you say, this wasn't just any rider. This is Jorge Martin. This is the man who, as Simon put on the podcast last year, even opens doors aggressively in normal life. Everything about Jorge Martin is an expression of emotion. And there's no way... Ducati's met Jorge Martin. It knew what was coming here as soon as it made its decision that he was not going to be in its factory seat. We're talking about Martin's emotions. We've talked about what spec bikes Pramac will get, what developments, what conversations Pramac will be involved in from here, and that having an impact. What do you think? What sort of impact is this going to have on Jorge Martin himself in title fight terms for the rest of this year? I would say, undoubtedly even more determined to leave as world champion, but it's another little bit of volatility and disruption at a time when Martin, performance-wise, has been... excuse a little error this weekend. Other people have crashed this year too. He's been as serene as Jorge Martin has ever been on track. But is this got a chance to destabilise that a little bit?
I mean, we know one thing for sure, and it's that Ducati won't ever be asking him to follow team orders this year, because he'll quite publicly tell them where to go if that happens. I'd like to think it won't. Especially over the longer term. I mean, maybe right now he's going to be a bit volatile. That's why I said that it's good that there's that 3-week break. I think he's going to come back in fairly level-headed. He has been better than we've ever seen him this year. He's been a different character. I don't think there's going to be too much for Ducati to worry about in that regards, or especially for Pramac to worry about.
I'm not convinced anger makes people faster, nor am I convinced anger makes people slower. I do think that he, in choosing Aprilia, in jumping into the arms of a manufacturer that wanted him, he will reinforce himself mentally for the rest of the season. Because imagine if you had to, again, go back to Ducati cap in hand and just ask for satellite, right? Imagine then going into the Pramac Ducati garage at the next race, and everybody's feeling sorry for you because everybody knows you've been screwed, basically, and you have to accept it, and you've had to accept second-tier status again at the manufacturer. I'm not sure there's a worse feeling. Well, there is, obviously, but it's a pretty bad feeling when everybody's feeling pity for you, and that's what would have happened. But nobody's going to feel pity for Jorge Martin now, or at least to a much lesser extent, because he took control of his own future, and he made himself the star signing of a cool manufacturer on the rise. I think that will mentally help. I don't think that'll make him faster, but I think what he has avoided here is making himself slower and coming off as the sad, beaten down party in all of this.
You describe Aprilia accurately as a cool manufacturer on the rise. I like that, but we have, like we said, we have had people on social media just point out some of the shortcomings of the Aprilia right now. The performance is very up and down. That may all be the riders. The bike does break more, I would say, than some of the other factory bikes does. Aprilia is not yet a championship-winning MotoGP team, nor does it quite look like one. Simon, what's your take on the Aprilia team that Martin will be joining next year?
I would imagine that part of the bet that they've made here is that, Massimo Rivola has been fairly open for the longest time about how disappointed he is that Aprilia have never had a title sponsor. I would imagine the part of the bet that they're making is that this will bring more money into the ranks, that there will be a new title sponsor for next year, that there'll be more money to spend, that there'll be more reliability work done, that things will break less as a result of having, this more rounded project. That there is obviously improvement to be made at Aprilia. I mean, that's obvious. They're not they're not very good at building reliable bikes compared to some of the others. But I think Aleix will have been doing the Lord's work convincing Martin that that's not a problem. And Rivola will be trying to secure as much more budget as possible now that he's found his alien.
Yeah, it's fair to say. It's still fair to say Aprilia is operating on the smallest budget of the manufacturers, isn't it? At this point, I can't see that, even with its status improving, and Honda and Yamaha struggling as they are still throwing more money at this than Aprilia is able to. I did get when Rivola was talking about phoning his boss to get the deal done. I did think an element of that as well wasn't just about getting permission to sign Martin. I just wondered if part of that was like, you might need to spend a few euros on making sure our bike is not blowing up with this guy on it as well, because that is going to be a fiery situation in all senses.
Yeah, but it's less than, like, it's less blowing up, because I think that's the image people have, but it might be slightly outdated. It's more just, it feels like that's the manufacturer that feels wear and tear of components the most.
Yeah,
and we've seen a consistent trend with Aprilia of its performances tailing off in the second half of the season, which has been attributed to heat sometimes, but also I would imagine is component wear and tear, and maybe also crew wear and tear potentially, just in terms of the resources they have, in terms of that, training and that the amount of personnel they have, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean we've seen things with like Espargaro's Motegi 22 problems. That was like someone loading the wrong software map into the bike halfway through a really intense series of flyaway races. There is, like you say, Val, it's not just that the bikes blow up. It's that there's things that can easily be fixed by more resource. We've seen that already.
Yeah, satellite teams don't win championships, allegedly. Manufacturers on small budgets might not win championships, but as Honda and Yamaha are proving, manufacturers with massive budgets also don't win championships if they don't use that budget right. This gives me an excuse to throw in what I'm calling the random Honda question. This is Lachlan from Australia. Said, I'd like to know if there was a moment that solidified in Marc Marquez's head that going back to Honda for 2025 wasn't an option. That's all. Val.
I mean, yeah, it was probably Qatar or Portimao, I imagine. Or, well, to be fair, I say that, right? I vaguely remember there being Spanish reporting, even in Valencia, when the Honda riders were pretty happy with the new prototype. Somebody from the Spanish ranks going, Marc's followed that bike on track and he knows it ain't it. Already, he knows this is not it.
Really?
And I think that reporting came out well before we all knew how not it that bike is. And it is extremely not it. It is the least it potentially in the history of MotoGP. I mean, obvious, like the Honda, I don't remember when I stopped believing it, but at a certain point, as much sense as it made in a vacuum, like when the bike's so bad, it just overrules everything and you may as well retire, which clearly a lot of the current Honda riders feel as well. I mean, you listen to at least half of them talk, like 2 of the 4, and it sounds like they are in a permanent state of shock at the idea that anybody else would even consider signing on the dotted line here. Like, this is a slight tangent. Joan Mir spoke to reporters yesterday, and also the days before. And every time he speaks, he sounds like a rider who's both 100% willing to leave Honda, but also willing to wait as long as possible to see all the offers he can get, because he's very sure that nobody else is swooping in to take that bike. And if they do, then be my guest. So it ended the second we saw just how bad this is, I think, for a potential Marc return. And rightly so. He does not have time in his career to be messing about with this.
I think he does. I think this extends the timeline, but I think if he wins 2 titles at Ducati and becomes the greatest rider of all times unequivocally, there's still the chance, and Honda build a much better 850 in 2027, there is still the chance for a fairy tale return. It's just not going to happen right away. But I'm never going to say never in that one.
No, I believe that. Just this bike he was never going to ride. That's all I'm saying. This bike, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lachlan's question stuck out to me because it just showed how fast this world is moving at the moment. It doesn't seem that long ago the idea of Marquez ever leaving Honda at all was fairly unthinkable, as bad as things were going. Then suddenly he's gone. But the idea of him coming back is very realistic. That now seems like history at the start of June 2024. But yeah, 2027 is a long way away.
Mir's also revealed that he's been chatting to Marquez about Marquez's decision recently of going to Gresini Honda. So presumably, we know where Marquez stands because, again, everything we've heard from Marquez, how this has been the best decision he's ever made. So, yeah.
When you're ready to pop the question, the last thing you want to do is second-guess the ring. At BlueNile.com, you can design a one-of-a-kind ring with the ease and convenience of shopping online. Choose your diamond and setting. When you find the one, you'll get it delivered right to your door. Go to BlueNile.com and use promo code SPOTIFY to get $50 off your purchase of $500 or more. That's code SPOTIFY at BlueNile.com for $50 off your purchase. BlueNile.com, code SPOTIFY.
This episode is brought to you by PwC. When unprecedented times are all the time, it's time to start walking the talk. Leaders like you turn to PwC to see and stay ahead. Upskill your workforce, use intelligent automation, and transform big ideas into breakthrough reinvention. Explore the human-led, tech-powered solutions that help you reinvent. It's all part of the new equation. Learn more at pwc.com.
Start your electric journey right here, right now. With a Volvo XC90 Recharge, our plug-in hybrid SUV with extended range. For more everyday electric journeys on a single charge, with a hybrid option for longer adventures. Contact your local retailer to book a test drive or design your own vehicle at volvocars.com/US. The Volvo XC90 Recharge Plug-in Hybrid, the electric car with a backup plan.
Your questions and your social media messages to us contained so many points about the potential repercussions and who goes where and which teams stay where. There's loads and loads and loads and loads and loads of repercussions for all this that we will get into. We're going to save some of them for next week, but let's just rattle through a few of the most immediate pressing questions now. Actually, the first pressing question, which I didn't put on the list, but I'm going to throw it in now because some people have asked about it. Ducati hasn't actually announced Marc Marquez yet. Have we got any expectation for when this will actually happen, or is Aprilia's quick move just blown that out of the water?
Yeah, Aprilia have sunk whatever plans they had. And I think maybe potentially they would have tried to do it this week, but no, there's no rush at all. We could spend the whole of this mini summer break leading up to Assen waiting on this news to come.
Next question. Obviously, Pramac has been at the centre of this. Does Marquez going to factory red and Martin getting right out of Ducati, does that make it more or less likely that Pramac goes to Yamaha? My first thought was more likely, because surely if you haven't got the Marquez carrot to dangle, that makes Ducati's case for keeping Pramac when Yamaha's offering a better deal much weaker. But Simon, you did make the point earlier that Ducati can now definitely promise Pramac it'll be getting 2025 bikes and basically have its pick of the rest of the lineup. But is that enough?
I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that Enea, Bastianini and Marco Bezzecchi is enough to convince them to turn down a Yamaha deal that... I did a quick bit of maths the other day, and I reckon a 3-year Yamaha deal with what we believe the terms and conditions to be is worth like 10 to 12 million euros to Pramac. That's a lot of money in MotoGP terms. I think if you believe you're not going to be winning titles, like they're trying to do this year, and like they would have done with Marc Marquez, because they're not going to if Marc Marquez and Pecco Bagnaia are in factory red, then why not take the Yamaha punt? Why not go down the different route and see what happens?
Yeah, I think they're just not the riders anymore to make that make sense for Pramac. And the fact that Marquez was being dangled as a carrot to begin with suggests that now that carrot is gone. I mean, that decision must have been pretty close one way or the other, and now one of the sides of that decision has been significantly hampered. I mean, anything can happen, and ultimately, you could still, as a decision maker, just go, no, actually, I want the good bikes, please. But this for me tips the scales into Yamaha's favors quite significantly.
You mentioned Bastianini just now as well. Where does he? It's been obvious for a while he is heading out of Ducati, or at least factory Ducati. Where does he go now for 2025?
As Bastianini's manager Carlo Pernat has been briefing a lot of media in this whole process throughout, and the latest that he said to an Italian radio station, I think Rai or something like that, was that he's heading to KTM. Not works. When I say KTM, I mean Tech 3. Which to me immediately annoyingly conjures up the image of Danilo Petrucci on one of those orange bikes, which was a very nice looking combination that didn't actually accomplish anything on track. So I would hope that part is different. If Enea Bastianini is indeed heading to Tech 3, it's cool for him, but it does suggest to me that maybe there's no way of keeping Pramac, honestly, because like if that part's already sewn up, then because you would try to stay at Pramac, I think. And Ducati would have an interest in at least keeping, 2 of the 3 that were in consideration. Ducati has still seen what Enea Bastianini is capable of in terms of, his special part of his riding. I mean, the fact is, again, his final lap in the Italian Grand Prix was absurdly quick to the shock and surprise of basically everybody involved. Including he still has a lot to offer as a Ducati rider. And the fact that it doesn't look like he'll be kept on suggests to me that there's just, that whole structure has been upended.
I spoke to Pernat over the weekend as well, and he said that he was pretty sure at that point factory Ducati wasn't going to happen, and his preferences were first Aprilia and then KTM. And he alluded to the fact that the KTM, I think he's like basically KTM's liaison to the Tech 3 team now. Their technical lead inside the Tech 3 camp is Albi Garibola, who used to be Bastianini's multiple race winning crew chief. So there's a link there right away that they think they'd be able to build on and turn into something really good and strong.
You mentioned Bastianini and Aprilia there in Rivola's briefing on Monday night. There was a strong. I'm going to paraphrase Rivola hideously here, but basically the Bastianini section was him going, "Yeah, we were really up for signing him, and then this happened. So let's leave that for another day." It's clear that Bastianini was a strong Aprilia target until the chance to just grab Martin cropped up. Rivola wants to keep Maverick Vinales to be Jorge Martin's teammate. Very clear that's the case. Rivola also forgot to tell Maverick Vinales that Martin was being signed in the absolute scramble of Monday at Aprilia. What does this actually mean for Vinales?
He's going to be very, very upset about that. And Aprilia were really sheepish about the fact that it had kind of been forgotten. He won't be happy about finding out from social media from it. He's already been flirting with other manufacturers. Rivola did go at length to suggest that he's the captain now if he wants to be, but he then also went on and said if he doesn't want to stay, we'll find someone else. We'll find someone fast and Italian, and bigged up Bastianini quite a bit. So I don't think that Aprilia are now. I don't think they've signed their big name and they're out of silly season. I think that there's still games to play there.
I expect Vinales to stay, but I'm just throw that out there. Maverick Vinales on a Pramac or a Gresini Ducati, and isn't that kind of cool? Wouldn't that be something? I'd like to see that quite a bit. It's really funny how
I'd like to see that the 5 times in a season it would be noticeable.
I don't know. I think it'd be more than that, genuinely, because I think so much of his weekend is conditioned by qualifying and getting off the line, and a Ducati is tailor-made to sort out both of those things in some way or another. Doesn't mean that there still wouldn't be crazy ebbs and flows, but I think the performance would be more robust. But it's probably not happening. So not going to waste our time thinking about it as enticing as that is. I still can't shift my head. All right. Now let's go back to the topic at hand.
You're back from Vinales land.
It's funny how I think it was during the day, it was still during Monday, he was asked about his preferred teammate. I think it was still Monday, and he shrugged and went, I don't know, Miguel Oliveira has a similar style to me. Maybe go for him. It's clearly doesn't sound like he's been kept fully abreast of everything that's going on, obviously. I think they'll still hash it out and figure out a way to stay, and I think we're in for a really, really interesting comparison of how Martin will stack up to Vinales. because I don't know. I don't really have an expectation there. I think there's a lot of people on social media who are like, oh, Martin will immediately just take control of that factory and blow Vinales out of the water. I'm not 100% there. Honestly,
I'm not on social media, but I am also that person who thinks Martin will immediately take control of this team. I think Vinales' top ceiling is so high, and on his day he's amazing. Just aren't enough of those days, and what happens in between I don't think is all down to the bike. Whereas Martin, you just know he's going to turn up and he's going to be fast. If he's not fast, it's because he's crashed out already.
But the RSGP is also a bit finicky.
True.
And I'm not sure how much less finicky it's become. We've seen almost all riders have, like, big names that have come in there have pretty long adaptation periods, which I think hasn't really come up yet, maybe because that part feels like it's in the past. It took Andrea Iannone like a year to get up to speed, and then he got himself banned. It took Maverick Vinales a fair amount of time to get properly up to speed. There are people who have been testing it who didn't really show very well on first appearance. The only exception, actually, genuinely has been Oliveira, who was money on the Aprilia from first appearance, then got injured a bunch and hasn't really been able to recapture those early glimpses of form since. So for me, I think there's no foregone conclusion that Martin will immediately click with it, even though he is a phenomenal rider. He will click with it, obviously, sooner than later. I don't think it will take long, but it's part of the equation for me. I'm interested to see how that goes.
Yeah, that point about will Martin need adaptation is one I hadn't thought of until you threw that in just there. We're used to seeing Martin as this pace monster, but he's a pace monster who's only actually ridden for one manufacturer in MotoGP. So this is a new challenge that we're going to see now. One of many new things that's going to be happening for 2025 after this absolute bombshell. Simon, Val, thank you for the early start this morning to bank this podcast. Thank you, Val's wife, for putting up with everything this did to your wedding anniversary as well. Simon, are you at a port at the moment? Are you literally about to get on the boat to the Isle of Man?
No, I'm at an airport. I'm in Milan airport, flying to Manchester and then onto the Isle of Man right now.
Excellent. Right. Get to the TT. And listeners, thank you for your company. Again, just a day after our previous podcast. Thank you for all the questions and points and takes. Like I say, we've got a bucket more to get through because you've delved quite deep into all the repercussions of this up and down the grid. So when we come back and join you next week, we'll have a lot more to tell you about everything else we found out about what is going to happen in the wake of this latest bit of seismic rider market fun.
The Athletic.